my first 50K was a disaster. I cried and like kind of limped my way to the finish. My second 50K was even a bigger disaster. I think I got dead last. I remember after that thinking, I don't know if I'm actually cut out for this. And then from there, it kind of snowballed. Well, if I can run 50 miles, I could run 100K. That's only 12 more miles. And if I can run 100K, I can run a 100-miler. It was at Mount St. Helens. It was pouring rain. It was freezing cold. There were like 12 finishers. I think I spent hours in one aid station. There were 2 volunteers at that aid station, and they had their van there. I was like soaking wet. I had like crossed a river. It had been pouring down rain. I was shivering, and I was like, there's no way I can go on. And they had me change into a fresh set of clothes, get into a sleeping bag in a van, and handed me a warm Nalgene water bottle. And I just like held on to that. Eventually I kind of dried out and got warm. I was like, okay, I guess I'll go finish this thing. There's 12 more miles. Proving to ourselves, or just seeing through our own experience, that we can push ourselves into a place that feels really uncomfortable physically and mentally, and just keep moving and get through it and come out the other side, and then we're fine. And then we had this really cool experience, and we did something that we didn't think that we could do.
Welcome to the Blue Rose Podcast, your dose of confidence to live a bold life. Here I share insights from my own journey and dive into the stories of individuals in the outdoors and athletics who are fiercely getting after life. I'm your host, Becca Blue Rose.
My name's Allie Hearts. I live in Bend, Oregon. I've been here about 15 years. And I grew up in Pennsylvania. So, came out to the West Coast when I was in my mid-20s, and came out here as a law school grad. I was a young lawyer and took the Oregon bar, and practiced law for a couple of years, and then ended up finding my way in a very meandering career path into ski guiding. And so now I work as a ski guide for Oregon Ski Guides and Three Sisters Backcountry here in Central Oregon. And I'm also an avalanche instructor, and that carries me through from December until June. And then during the off season, I'm a writer. I do a lot of freelance writing, lots of gear reviews. That's kind of my bread and butter, and it's fun, but kind of a whole mix of outdoor related writing topics. And then I spend most of my summer running long distances, running ultras, but I also love to rock climb and mountain bike and do all the things. So, and I have 2 dogs.
Oh, cute. What are their names?
Riggins and Fernspiegel. Fernspiegel that's named after a type of snow. But she goes by Fernie or Spieggy for short, and they're my running buddies and camping buddies, and they go skiing and stuff too.
Oh, what kind of dogs are they?
Riggins is a border collie, just through and through. He's a working dog. Mostly his primary job is fetching pine cones. And then Fernie she's just a total mutt. She's like a 50-pound dog, mixed cattle dog, a little bit of husky, some terrier, a little bit of everything.
Okay. I'm always curious what kind of dogs people have, because when I get a dog, I'm like, I need a dog that will run. I know that like dogs aren't going to be able to run like 50 miles with me, but like it would be cool to have a dog that can like go for a couple hours and not be dead.
Yeah.
So,
And Riggins, I mean, he has run over 40 miles with me before. And it's not like, air quotes running. We're going slow. It's not, he's not running the whole time. He's like trotting along and chasing pine cones. But yeah, he can go forever. They both can. Yeah.
I love that. I also love that they have such unique names, because I feel like normally it's like, I don't know, like my dog's name is Finn, and I feel like there's so many dogs that are named Finn now that I have a dog named, well, my parents' dog. And it's like Max or like Buddy, and so I've never heard these names. So I'm like, I love that.
Thanks.
Were you like, so where are you from?
I'm from Pennsylvania. Yeah, I kind of I kind of roll through that a little quick, but yeah.
No, that's okay. Were you always like outdoorsy and into like running and skiing, or was that something that you kind of adapted when you moved?
That's a little bit of a yes and no. I grew up, I learned to ski when I was really little, at a tiny little hill in central Pennsylvania. And I'm so grateful that I learned when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And my family would go to our little ski hill through the winters, like especially when I was really young, a little bit less when I got into middle school and high school. And I did a lot of sports. I was a swimmer. I played water polo. So I was like really into kind of more traditional sports. And my family, we would go hiking and we would do some outdoor things. I did some canoeing with my dad, but we didn't go on backpacking trips. We didn't go camping. So in some ways, I didn't experience any of that until I moved out west. And then, but yeah, like I kind of had a background in sports. And then once I like, I guess kind of during college and post college years, I got more into running and was interested in like training for a marathon. And I was doing some triathlons. But then when I moved to Bend, that's when I really started trail running. And because the trail networks around here go from town as far as you want, you could pick up the PCT and go to Canada or Mexico. That just
Mhm.
absolutely blew my mind, especially coming from the East Coast where nothing, I didn't have that kind of access. So coming here and having access to the outdoors and to the trails just kind of like blew everything wide open for me and just made the opportunities feel endless.
What was the process for you for like getting into trail running? Because I know that like sometimes it can be a little bit of a daunting thing to get into, especially if you're doing it by yourself.
Totally. Yeah, I think when I first started trail running, I didn't really even, I was just like running the trails in town and I didn't even really distinguish between road running and trail running. It was more just lifestyle exercise, going out to run from my house and like picking up the trail. Um, and then when I would say I started making friends who were like running in the mountains. And that really intimidated me. And I thought, I didn't know if that was something I could do. And initially, and I also didn't understand that like part of trail running, especially in the mountains, it absolutely includes like running slow and hiking the
Mhm.
uphills and stuff like that. And so that took me some time to kind of like I went from like, oh, I can't do this because I can't run that uphill to like, oh, I can actually walk this and I don't need to worry if I forget about like my pace or how long it's taking. I can actually just go enjoy being outdoors. And then I kind of got onto this path of like self-discovery through trail running, and then that kind of took me into ultra running where I just was more interested in like trails that I could link up and like, oh, I can run to this lake or this spot, or I can run up this mountain, even if I'm also hiking it, and go do this thing and make it an adventure that's a half day or a full day. And so it became more about the adventure and exploration than even just the running.
And what did that teach you about yourself to be like, oh, I can't do this, to then like, oh, wait, like this is something that I can do?
It opened up a whole new world for me. And I learned that if I if I let go of expectations around pace or what an activity is supposed to be or supposed to look like, then I can just go have fun being in the mountains and just reap all the benefits of getting up high and exploring and just kind of seeing what I can do. And it taught me a lot, I would say, about um, limits are usually self-imposed, and I have found a lot of joy and satisfaction in kind of finding exactly where that edge is and what are my self-imposed limits versus what are my actual limits of my body and my capabilities or my fitness.
When did you start like racing? Because I know there's races in there, so like I guess like
Yeah.
from the time that you started trail running, like when did you start racing, and were you ever like I want to compete, or was racing just like for fun to do it with other people?
It definitely started out as can I do this? I think I can do this. And then later became more about competition a little bit, but always for fun and always for myself. Um, but let's see. So I moved to Oregon in 2009 and started trail running probably a lot more in like 2011, 2012, and then signed up for my first 50K in 2013. And my first 50K was a disaster, a little bit of a disaster. I think I was probably undertrained. My IT band blew up at like mile 20. I basically, I think I cried and like kind of limped my way to the finish and was kind of like, well, I finished, but I'm disappointed. And then my second 50K was even possibly a bigger disaster. I ran one in Moab in February, and I think this time I like way overtrained because I was trying to do consistent training for 50K through the winter when all I really wanted to do was go skiing. So I was going skiing all the time and then also trying to like squeeze in 50K training. And I showed up, and then like I went with some friends and we did this road trip straight from Bend to Moab. And I just remember being at the start line and just feeling exhausted. And it was kind of a similar thing where I probably got 20-ish miles in and then just felt awful and thought I was getting injured and kind of like hobbled my way to the finish and probably cried. And I think I got dead last. Um, and I remember after that thinking, I don't know if I'm actually cut out for this. I don't know if I can do this. And then that the following summer, the summer of 2014, I started running ultra distances for fun, just adventures in the mountains. And then I realized, well, of course I can do it because I just ran 30 miles around Mount St. Helens. I just ran 40 miles around Mount Hood. So I can do a 50K race. I just hadn't figured it out yet. Um,
Mhm.
and then I started, and even still, the next few years after that, I was kind of like, there weren't a lot of books at that time. There weren't a lot of training plans that were readily available. There's a lot more resources, I think, now between books, online materials, coaching, all of that stuff. And back then it felt a little bit more niche, even though ultra running had been around for decades at that point. But it felt very new to me and kind of hard to figure out. But yeah, I kind of just went trial by error and slowly progressed.
Yeah, yeah. What like what was your next race after those two 50Ks then? Because I don't know, I feel like if you have two experiences where you're just like, that was like awful. You're like,
Yeah.
why? Like what made you be like, you know what? That was like awful and it was awful twice, but you know, might as well just give it another shot.
That's a great question. I mean, well, and I think that that's what steered me toward I'm going to remove the pressure of racing
Hmm.
and go run in the mountains for fun because that's what I really wanted to do. And if I take away the pressure of doing a race or completing a race and just go run that distance, then I'm proving to myself that I'm capable of running that distance.
Hmm.
And so that was huge. So I did that for a while. And then I don't actually remember the following year I ran a 50 miler. So I
Okay.
just like leveled up. I don't even remember the next 50K I ran, but I
You're like,
continued.
maybe the 50K isn't for me. Like
Yeah,
it's just the 50
I'm
miler.
just gonna skip over it. And I went right to the 50 miler. And then from there it kind of snowballed and I had a decent 50 miler. I had a
Hmm.
lot of fun. It felt like a success. Um, I made mistakes, but that's how it goes. Especially the longer the distance, it's just easier. to, you know, make mistakes. You have more time available to make mistakes.
Hmm.
But it was a great experience. And so summer of 2015, I ran a 50 miler. That was a good experience. And then I went from there and I was like, well, if I can run 50 miles, I could run 100K. That's only 12 more miles. And if I can run 100K, I can run a 100 miler. And so I
Yep.
just kind of like the momentum, the momentum carried me forward. And I ran 100K that fall of 2015, and it was kind of an epic because it was 100K, but then the race director was like, oh, it's actually more like 70 miles. And then it was like pouring rain. It was at Mount St. Helens. It was pouring rain. It was freezing cold. And it was like, there were like 12 finishers or something. It was wild. But it
Were
was
you
all,
one of them?
I finished.
Okay, I was like, did you finish or did you
I
not?
finished. Yeah, I
Okay.
finished, but like I think I took like I think I spent hours in one aid station. Like I would have dropped, except there were two volunteers at that aid station and they had their van there. I was like soaking wet. I had like crossed a river. It had been pouring down rain. I was shivering. And I was like, there's no way I can go on. I'm soaked to the bone and like shivering. And they were like, we have dry clothes, we have like waterproof jackets. And um, so they had me, and they had their van there, and they had me change into a fresh set of clothes, get into a sleeping bag in a van, and handed me a warm Nalgene water bottle. And I just like held on to that. And eventually I kind of dried out and got warm again. And I was like, okay. And this race had a very generous time cutoff, which was part of the appeal as well. Um, and so finally I was like, okay, I'm not shivering. And I think the rain had kind of dwindled. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go finish this thing. There's 12 more miles. And I wore a volunteer's like gigantic Gore-Tex because I was like, I'm not getting wet again. I'm not getting cold again. I mean, it had hailed. It was like just wild weather. And I knew like I couldn't handle getting that cold again. But I wore this race volunteers like gigantic Gore-Tex jacket over top of all my stuff and got to the finish. And those two people ended up becoming friends, and we did some adventures in the following years and still keep in touch. But
How
yeah,
far was the finish from you at that point?
I think it was about 12 miles. So
Okay.
not far, but
But
not
not
that
close.
close. Yeah.
I
I
was
could
like,
I could be misremembering that, but I think it was about 12 miles.
and what's the cutoff time? Like this, okay, this was sorry, was this a 100 miler or the
This was
70K?
this was 100K, but it
100K.
was like 70 miles, but it was the
Yeah.
Bigfoot 100K. And it
Okay.
was part of a 200-mile race that they put on in the Mount St. Helens area.
Hmm.
Um, and so the 100K had like a ridiculously generous time cutoff. I don't remember what it was, but it's like if
Hmm.
you because it was tied to the 200 miler. So,
Okay.
yeah. So it was
So they
like
were like, you
time.
basically have all of the time that the 200 miler
Yeah,
has.
yeah, like take all
Okay.
the time you need and get it. Like if you just keep going. So even
You'll
with,
get there.
yeah, I don't know how long I spent in that aid station, but say I spent 4 hours at the aid station. It's like even with that, I was gonna, I could finish.
Wow.
So
Yeah. Well, like, okay, so I'm just like, oh my God.
I
Like,
know.
but see, but then it's like, okay, right? Like, then the simplest question after that, again, is just like, why, why do we do stuff like this? Like, why was that fun for you? Like, like, what is the thing that like keeps you going in those scenarios? Because I'm about to do my first 50 miler in 10 days. And, and like, every time I tell someone, like, I'm doing a 50 miler, they literally just like stop and they're like, is that fun for you? Like, do you just hate yourself? And I'm like, I don't know. Like,
I
you
mean,
know?
I think, I joke that like it's fun when it's over.
Yeah.
But I think, but I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I think one, there's a challenge to us in making it fun while we're doing it because it is
Mhm.
uncomfortable, downright painful at times. It can be so uncomfortable. It can be agonizing. And I mean, I think probably every ultra that I've done at some point I'm like, why am I doing this? Um but then on the other side, what I've learned is that no matter how badly it hurts in the moment or how badly I want it to stop and be done, once I finish it and the pain almost immediately goes away. Definitely within a day or two, I don't even feel sore anymore. And then it's like, wow, we did that. I did that. I ran 50 miles.
Mhm.
I think I could do that better. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
sign up for another one. And I have a joke too with some of my friends that every time I do an ultra for a while, maybe less so now, I think I've learned, but like I mean, I've been running ultras now for over 10 years. In the first 5 to 6 years, probably after every single like 100% of the races I did, I'd be like, nope, not doing, got it done, not doing that again. And then within like 48 hours, I'd be like, ooh, look at this race. This looks fun.
Oh my
And
God,
so,
it's so real.
yeah. And eventually I learned to just stop saying that I'm not going to do it again because we all know that I will. Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's something to that though, that proving to ourselves or just seeing through our own experience that we can push ourselves into a place that feels really uncomfortable physically and mentally, um, and just keep moving and get through it and come out the other side, and then we're fine.
Hmm.
And then we had this really cool experience and we did something that we didn't think that we could do. And I think that's where some of the magic is. And then it's like, well, I want that feeling again, or I think I can do that better, or I can apply what I learned from this experience to the next one.
Hmm.
And there's so much there because I mean, there's this whole other thing to ultra running. And I've even heard professionals say this, that like you think you figured it out and you haven't, you can't. For example, nutrition. Like, oh, I know that if I eat this way, because maybe I have a good race where I eat blah, blah, blah gels, every 45 minutes, and that worked. And so then I think, okay, I'm going to do that in the next race. And then the next race, it completely goes off the rails and doesn't work at all. And, or like fatigue. I've heard Courtney Dauwalter say, I think in one of her 200-mile races, that she took like a 5-minute power nap at some point during the race and it like completely reset her and she felt amazing. And so she was like, that's the key. I'm going to do that again. And so her next race, she did that and she was like, that didn't work. So I think there's like, it's kind of a puzzle. Um,
Hmm.
and it's not, you can definitely learn things and apply them and they do work going forward. But not always. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's ever a guarantee with these things. And I think that makes
Hmm.
it really cool. Um, and when it comes down to it, it's just you inside your own head choosing to continue on when you really don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I read this thing the other day and it was like, expect the pain, because it was like people quit because they expect the pain to last forever. But if you expect the pain and like know that it's gonna end,
Hmm.
like kind of like you're saying, you get to the finish line and then like within 48 hours, it's like, oh, like I'm totally fine. I could go. Like sometimes it's even hard. I don't know about you, but like after my 50K this summer, I it was like really hard for me to even take like a week off. I was like, I'm ready to go. Like I'm ready to keep running. So I think that was just like interesting to hear about. And I think you're also that is true. Like I think that's one of the reasons I love ultra running is like this summer I learned that you're supposed to like I ran 2 marathons last year and I didn't know I was supposed to eat during them.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning that this summer and like figuring out that puzzle and like water and nutrition and like clothing even like it is just kind of one big puzzle that it's like and it is I do enjoy the process, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And learning to eat, I mean, that's still something. I think that's just a ongoing process that never really ends.
mhm.
But that was a big one for me, just not even learning how to fuel in races, which there's that, but also training myself um, to fuel. So fueling on my training runs, because I would go to a race and say, okay, I'm going to eat every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes or something, and inevitably I would feel nauseated at some point, or I would struggle to eat. And then I would be on my training runs and I'd be like, oh, well, it's only a 3-hour training run. I'll just like eat a big meal when I'm done or something. And now I know I have to eat during
Yeah.
those, especially during those medium to long runs, um, the way that I want to fuel, because I'm training my gut to also be able to eat during the race itself. So
Yeah.
nutrition has been that's taken me a long time to start to demystify, but there's a lot. And I think it's like it's so individual as in terms of like what works for different people.
Hmm.
There's certainly not one way, but
Hmm.
but fueling is like whatever it looks like, just fuel.
Yeah. Yes.
Before, during, after. I used to go running and like not even like a short run. I used to go running, not eat before I went running. And now, like, no way. I have my breakfast, then I go for my run, then I have my second breakfast, and then I feel great. And I don't like go into these like, or yeah, if I do that, then I don't hit a point in the day where I'm like bonking or like eating everything in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that too. I mean, also, I'm just like a big fan of second breakfast. It's like my
Yes.
favorite.
Oh, me
It's
too.
like my favorite part of the day. I'm like, oh, okay, I get to wake up and like eat something before I go running, and then I get to eat breakfast again. Like, you're
Yes.
kidding me, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's sign me up. I love it.
Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you're someone who loves the great outdoors and pushing your limits. I want to introduce you to Flow Zone Performance Coaching, the ultimate online training platform for outdoorsy people who like to do hard things. Flow Zone Performance Coaching is designed for those who crave adventure, whether it's climbing, trail running, mountain biking, skiing, or just exploring the wild. Coach Jess specializes in preparing you for the challenges of the mountains with a unique program called FZ Mountain Fit. FZ Mountain Fit is a subscription style program designed to help you build strength, endurance, and resilience for your outdoor adventures. If you're ready to elevate your outdoor performance and join a community of like-minded adventurers, check out Flow Zone Performance Coaching today. Head over to www.fzperformance.com or at FZ Mountain Fit on Instagram to start your journey with Flow Zone Performance Coaching. Trust me, you won't regret it. Guys, if you're enjoying the show, could you do me the biggest favor? Could you spare 90 seconds out of your day? Head over to Apple Music or Spotify, give us a subscribe, give us a rating or a review. I would really appreciate it. It not only supports me, but it supports getting awesome guests on the show. Thanks a bunch.
Okay, so you also ran Western States 100, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is, because I know that like that's a process to get like even qualified, let alone you have to get your name pulled out of like a drawing, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
what was that process like? Slash, how was your experience running Western States 100?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the process, so Western States, it's the oldest 100 miler, I think, in the world. Definitely in North America. I think the oldest 100 miler in the world. And it's gotten so competitive to get into that the basically if anyone wants to get into Western States in the next 10 to 20 years, you have to start qualifying now. And the way to qualify, you can go onto the Western States website and there's a list of qualifying races. You can qualify with 100K, so you don't have to run a 100-miler every year. But yeah, I just started running qualifiers. My first one was probably in 2016, and just kind of thought, I don't know if I ever want to get into this race. I'm kind of curious about it, and I know it's a pretty big deal in the ultra running community, so I'll just keep putting my name in the lottery, and who knows.
Mhm.
And my name got pulled for the 2023 race. I think I had 32 lottery tickets. So every year you qualify, you enter the lottery. If you don't go in the following year, you qualify again, and then your lottery count doubles.
Mm.
So you have to keep qualifying, but as long as you do, your lottery ticket count will keep going up. And if you miss a year, it used to be that if you missed a year of qualifying and entering the lottery, you'd lose all your tickets and go back to zero. So that was pretty intense, especially for women having children or people dealing with injury.
Yeah.
And so they changed the rules a few years ago, and that's huge because now at least you don't lose your lottery tickets.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then every year in early December, there's a lottery, and my name got pulled. I couldn't believe it. Even with 32 tickets, I was like, yeah, I'll put my name in, but like, there's no way I'm getting in.
Because
And
how many people are in that pool?
like, I think like 40,000 tickets, over
Okay.
40,000 tickets.
And how many people run that race?
There's like 300 spots.
Wow, okay.
I don't know or 300 and 70 or something. I don't know the
Mhm.
exact. I should know all the stats, but I don't.
No, no, no.
um, but it's a relatively small field, especially compared to races like the UTMB, that has like over 1,000 people in the field. And yeah, so I found out in early December, um, of 2022 that I got into the 2023 race, and I was like, this, holy cow. I was in shock for the whole entire day, and I was just like sitting there with my phone, like calculating and recalculating the odds, like, wait, how did this happen? I just couldn't believe it. And then I decided to basically treat this like the once in a lifetime opportunity that it was, and cleared, kind of not fully, but like basically cleared my schedule, cleared my calendar outside of work for 6 months from January to the end of June, and just fully dedicated myself to that race, and decided, not only because it was Western States and it was such a unique opportunity, but also because I had run 300 milers at that point, and I had been working with a coach for a few years, and pieces were starting to come together. As I said before, most of my first ultras were like total disasters, and I felt like things were starting to click, and I was figuring out the training, figuring out nutrition. Things were starting to come together, and I thought, I want to use this opportunity to see what I can do with a 100-miler. And the goal with Western States for a lot of people is to run it sub 24 hours. That's just part of the history of the race. If you run it under 24 hours, you get a special finisher's belt buckle, a silver one.
Mm.
And so a lot of people, and it's traditionally a fast course, so that running under 24 hours is possible for a lot of people. And so that's a very common goal if it's at all within reach. And so I set that as my goal. I talked to my coach, and I was like, I think I can, if everything lines up, I think I could go sub 24 hours in a 100-miler. and he agreed. And then I really didn't start training. It was, then it was like, well, it's December, so back to skiing and ski guiding, and so I wasn't really training for states through the winter, but I was just running enough to kind of keep a base
Mm-hmm.
of running fitness. But every run, and this was a really cool part of the experience for me, every single run I went on from that lottery day until the race, I was thinking about Western States and visualizing it and what is it going to be like, just how is it going to unfold. And it was a really magical, just 6-month period of my life. Everything felt so exciting. And of course, in 2023, we had an amazing winter, and it kept snowing until late spring that year. And it dumped like a meter of snow in April, and I was like out at Smith running, and I was like, what am I doing? I should be skiing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was so excited. Normally skiing is my first love and running is a close second, but like I'll take powder skiing any day. But in this case, I felt so committed to Western States training and to my goals that I was like, hey, my friends are out skiing that powder. I'm happy for them. And I'm also happy for myself to be running 30 miles at Smith in like really cold, unseasonably cold, snowy conditions at Smith. It was beautiful. And I had friends. The other cool thing was that um, throughout this training period, I had local friends that were so excited to join in any aspect of my training. So I had friends on all of my runs that were just excited to be part of the training process. And that was really cool. And then the race itself, I mean, there were some things that went wrong that day. And I made some mistakes, but generally I had like the day that I had dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. Um, it was such a big snow year. It was a big snow year down in California and a cool spring. Um, so the first 25-ish miles of the course were mostly snow, that happened also in 2019 um, down there. But yeah, so we were running on snow for quite a few miles early in the race, and I was mentally prepared for that it would just be slower. For the first 50K of the race was just, don't even look at my watch, just stay relaxed, don't worry about the snow, um, just like conserve my energy and get ready for the second half of the race. And I was just so excited to be there, that I was like, nothing is going to bother me on this day. I'm not letting anything get to me. I am going to just soak up this experience. Um, and so the first 50K was pretty smooth. The second 50K, that's like the kind of the notorious section through the canyons where it can get really, really hot. It's rugged. Um, that area had burned the year before, so there's even less shade than there had been in years past. And it's a tough section of the course where, um, for people that go out too fast, that's often where they break. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt, aside from like some small issues, I actually felt really, really good through that section and came out of the canyons, um, just like a marble in a groove, just rolling and feeling great, and came through Michigan Bluff, which is about the halfway point. It's like mile 55 or so. And yeah, I was doing great. And then at mile 62 at Forest Hill is where you can pick up pacers.
Oh.
So um, I was just like doing great, but I also knew there's a lot of race left. And sure enough, between Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill, I started having some pretty serious GI distress, and had a close call with pooping my pants. A couple close calls.
As it goes.
Yes, as it goes. And yeah. And so I came into Forest Hill, um, still feeling really good and very excited to pick up a pacer, but feeling like, uh-oh. And then so then there's like an 18-mile or 16-mile section down to the river crossing. And that section, I continued, my stomach just felt very delicate and I was nervous. I was moving well, so that was good. My quads were starting to get really, really sore and hurt a lot. It's a lot of downhill, just pounding on the quads, and came through, but was still like doing fine and on pace for my goal, but like it was close. And so went from Forest Hill. There's kind of like a rolling downhill section to the river, which is like mile 78. And that's where I swapped out pacers. And I was like, okay, the goal is within reach, but there's still 22 miles left of this thing. Like this can go either way. And I took some Imodium, and yeah, and that was like, it was also the river crossing. It was probably like 11 o'clock at night or so. And so we're going into like the last 20 miles of the course. Like the middle of the night is the hardest, not just the dark, but just the fatigue. My quads were really, really starting to hurt. And it was like, okay, I've just got to hold on. But like, this is not this. I was like, if this comes down to the wire and is like a sprint finish for this buckle, like, I don't know if I'm up for it. That's like, I was like, I want to just be able to cruise in, and I don't want this to come down to like having to fight, but it might. And but yeah, I kept plugging along. I was able to run pretty well on the actually like any gradual uphills and flats. Any downhill was just absolutely just agonizing. My quads were shredded to bits in those last 20 miles. My GI fortunately gradually improved, and I was able to continue getting food down. It's hard, especially in the middle of the night. It's hard to keep eating food. But I remember there's one of the aid stations, I think mile 90 or 85, where they have pancakes. So that's always nice. I paced a friend at this year's Western States, and we rolled into that aid station, and I was like, oh yeah, pancakes. That's like the most amazing thing in 100 milers, having pancakes somewhere in the last like 20 miles. Yeah, and I just held on, and I think I was pretty nervous, and was just, and my pacer is a good friend, and she had done like so much of my training with me and my workouts, and she has a track and field background. And I was like, oh, I don't know, like, are we gonna make it? It feels like, I think my goal is like slipping out of reach. And she was like, no, we're fine. And she just kept saying it, like, nope, we're fine, it's gonna be fine. And finally I was like, okay, I'm just gonna trust her and stop like stressing about this and just keep, I just like visualized, she was running in front of me, and I just visualized like a string attaching us, and I just like stared at her feet and followed her. And then I think around mile 95 or 96, somewhere in there, I was like, I finally started to accept, like, okay, I can do this. There was enough of a cushion that I knew I could finish the last few miles within my time goal. And then I remember when we crossed No Hands Bridge, that's like right at the end. It's like oh, I should know all of these numbers. I think it's like mile 98 or 97 and a half or something. It's like a couple miles from the finish. And that was No Hands Bridge is like what I had visualized so much through my training, just like crossing this bridge over the river, because I knew once you cross No Hands Bridge, you're so close to the finish.
Hmm.
And when we crossed No Hands Bridge, I was like, okay, we're doing it. I think we had like an hour to run 2.5 miles or something. So I was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, and then the amazing thing about Western States is you get to Roby Point at mile 99, and then your entire crew can join you for the last mile. So my
Mm.
whole crew was there, or it's like a mile and a half or something like that. But they were all there, and then it felt like, okay, we're just out. These are people that had been training with me for the past 6 months, and here we are, just out on another run in the wee hours of the morning, and then getting onto the track at Western States, like finishing on the track is pretty incredible. Um, and yeah, I finished in just over 23 and a half hours. So yeah, it was a magical day. Yeah, it was incredible. And then what's I think the most amazing thing, there's so much about Western States that's really special. I kind of knew as like an outsider and a spectator, but then when I went down and raced it, I got to experience so much of what makes it special. It's the culture and the community and the volunteers, and the race at the front is always really, really exciting. It's so competitive. Um, the best runners in the world within minutes of each other, right? It's just like, it's always so exciting to follow. But what I really, really love about Western States is the golden hour. Um, and that's the final hour where the time cutoff for the race is 30 hours. And so people coming in the last hour, um, if you come into the finish outside of that 30-hour, you don't get an official finish or a belt buckle. And
Hmm.
so the people that are coming in that 29th hour are absolutely fighting with everything they've got to get that finish and get that belt buckle. And everybody, all of the volunteers, all of the people who finished hours and hours and hours ago, all of the crew and spectators, everybody comes to the track, and it's packed, and the energy is electric. It's just incredible. And as people come in during that final hour and finish on the track, everyone is just like screaming their faces off. It brings me to tears every time, because now I've been there twice for the golden
Hmm.
hour, and it's just one of the most incredible things I've ever gotten to witness. Just people fighting for that finish, and everyone, crowds and crowds of people just cheering for them with everything, with their whole heart. It's absolutely magical.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I didn't know that that's how it ended, but I do have some people that have recommended like if there's any race I could spectate or
Hmm.
crew, they were like you have to do Western States 100. Like
Yeah.
you just have to be there. Like if you're at all interested in running, like that's the
Yes.
race to just spectate at. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's really spectator friendly. I wish I had been going down years before. And now I'll
mhm.
go down every year that I can. Um, and yeah, it's super easy to spectate. Um, and yeah, it's so incredible. And it's such a good demonstration of all of the magic of the trail running, the ultra running community, the history, the culture, the community. Um, there's a lot of just really, really special energy at that event, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in trail running, interested in running a 100-miler, curious about it, if they can get to Auburn at the end of June, to go do it.
With that experience though, because like they like what you just described, right, was like yeah, the most magical thing in the world. And then there's this other piece, right? Like after that race, like are you thinking like, oh, I'm never gonna do something like that again? Or are you thinking like, oh, like what's my next goal? Because like there is that piece of like, okay, I just like did this thing and it was amazing and I reached my goal and I want to like celebrate it and appreciate it. But also then there's the piece of like, okay, but like I just did that thing and it was super incredible and what's next?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, I would say I felt well initially after Western States. I my recovery went really well. I rested a lot. That's huge. I generally, after a 100 miler, I will not allow myself to run for about 10 days. And then, because not only does my body need rest, but my mind needs rest too. So even if by the end of a week, if I'm like, oh, well, my legs feel fine, I could go for a little jog. Like my mind needs a longer break. So I personally wait at least 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, if I'm like, oh, I really want to run, then I'll go for a run. And so after States, I started running again a couple weeks later and was feeling good and feeling like, well, I've got all this fitness and it's only July. What am I going to do? And so I
Hmm.
ended up signing up for another 100 miler because then I was like, well, maybe I could run. That'd be a good goal, running 200 milers in a year and seeing how my body handles that. But I signed up for I'm Tough, which is more of a mountain 100 miler, a lot more difficult. So it's completely different than States. Um, and I intentionally set a goal of just going and getting the experience and having fun and not having any time goal at all, which is hard, um, because that can, even like those little mileposts during the race of like, oh, I'm on pace for, a blah, blah, blah 28-hour finish or whatever. It's easy to like start focusing on that.
Hmm.
And in that race, I forced myself to like, nope, just like look at this beautiful mountainous landscape and just like give myself a different experience. And I had a great time. And then I had also signed up for the New York City Marathon, um, back in the spring. So I knew from even before States that I had that on the horizon for the fall. And so I switched to marathon training, which was kind of a crapshoot. um, because once I signed up for a second 100 miler, then I really didn't leave myself time to like properly train for a road marathon. But again, I just kind of like did a few speed workouts and was like, well, let's just go see what happens. And so I continued kind of riding that fitness and the motivation and just the stoke of the year. But then, so that carried me through 2023. And then this year, I haven't run a single race.
Hmm.
Um, I have barely been running really at all. I mean, barely. I've been running um, probably less than half the mileage that I ran, for sure, less than half the mileage I ran last year. And last year was like the most running I've ever done in my life. It was a great experience, but I also knew at the end of the year that's not really I don't know if that's really sustainable for me, and I don't know that that's really what I want for myself.
Hmm.
Um to try to run that volume because there's so many other things that I love to do, running, climbing, biking. And so this year I made it much more about a balance of all the things that I really wanted to do. And I thought I would sign up for a race, and I was looking at races a lot throughout the year, and then every time I'd get to like the final step, I'd be like, "Nah, I think I
Mm.
just want to like I've been running socially, I've been running to get my dogs out and just enjoy being outside, but I've been doing other things." And so I've kind of been like, I think I've kind of like last year I kind of swung pretty hard into more serious running. And then this year I swung back to like less running than I've done probably in the last 10 years. And then I think in 2025, I'll probably kind of refine an equilibrium where I'm I go back to running and racing, but it's hard. And I didn't expect this year to unfold as it has. I thought I would just kind of back off a little bit, but continue signing up for races. But what I've learned is that I still feel really excited to run and race and motivated. And it also feels really good to take a break from it and to just kind of let those embers burn, I guess, and go into next year feeling really excited. I'll probably want to run another 100-miler. And I think I'll go, my background aside from Western states has been more of like the mountainous 100-milers. And I think I'll go back into those types of races. And there's so many that just look beautiful and amazing and fun. And so I'll probably kind of head back in that direction.
Well, something that I like to do kind of to like finish us off is ask if there's a piece of advice that you've gotten throughout, doesn't have to be in running, just like throughout life that's like stuck with you, that you could share with the audience today.
Ooh, so many little bits.
So many
that I think
nuggets.
about. Yeah, so many. One thing that I think about a lot, that applies to running, but also to life. And this one is attributed to Chrissy Mail, who's a friend and a hero and a longtime veteran ultra runner. She said, "It's not always, it's just right now." And I think about it in terms of the good and the bad. So in a race, if early in a race or midway through a race, if I'm feeling amazing, it's kind of a good reminder to like keep myself in check, because things can turn on a dime. And then also when things feel impossibly hard, to remind myself, this is just a low point right now. This is not the rest of the race. This is not the rest of the day. It's not forever. It's just a moment in time. And that helps me. It just helps me stay grounded, and kind of neutral, and just in life too, when things feel chaotic or overwhelming. It's like, whew, okay, deep breath. It's not always, it's just right now, one step at a time. There are highs and lows. So yeah.
I love that. Well, Allie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Becca. It was great to meet you.
And that's a wrap on today's Dose of Confidence. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you found inspiration here, why not share it with a friend? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss an episode. Sending lots of love your way. Until next time, this is Becca, encouraging you to live your boldest life.